Now y'all come on up here and set a spell. Pour yourself something sweet. Maybe some sweet tea. Maybe something a little stronger if the day's been long. Because tonight, we're talking about a singer. But not just any old singer. We're talking about Dolly Rebecca Parton. And she's so much more than just a singer. And I don't care if you're from East Tennessee, South Alabama, or a high-rise apartment in the heart of New York City's madness, where the only porch you've got is a fire escape. Dolly belongs to you just the same. Now, Dolly Parton came into this world on January the 19th, 1946, in a little place called Locust Ridge, Tennessee, tucked deep in the Great Smoky Mountains. That alone tells you something. Mountains make people sturdy. They make them resourceful. And sometimes they make them legendary. She was the fourth of 12 children born to Robert Lee Parton and Avie Lee Owens Parton. Her siblings included Willadine, David, Denver, Bobby, Stella, Cassie, Randy, Larry, who tragically died shortly after birth, Floyd and Frida, the twins, and Rachel. Now let me pause right there, because Dolly didn't just grow up poor, she grew up mountain poor, which is a whole different category. She once said, "We were so poor, we didn't even know we were poor until someone told us." That's not a joke, that's perspective. Her daddy, Lee Parton, was a tobacco farmer and construction worker. A good man, but he didn't know how to read or write. Her mama, Avie Lee, was the soul of that house. She knew hundreds of old ballads, hymns, and mountain songs. She sang while she cooked, while she worked, while she lived. And whether Avie Lee realized it or not, she was schooling a future songwriter without ever opening a book. Dolly was born in a one-room cabin with no electricity, no running water, and when the doctor came to deliver her, the family didn't have money to pay him. So they paid him with what they had, a sack of cornmeal. Dolly would later say, "I often joke that I was paid for with a sack of cornmeal, but that sack of cornmeal was worth more than any money they could have given." Now that right there, that's country economics. They were what was called sharecroppers. Now that's where you live on someone else's land and farm the land. In exchange for you living on the land, you give the owner a portion of what you farm from the land. And folks, that's not much at all, and it's hard work to boot. It was tough producing enough to earn your keep on the land and feed your family at the same time. But in that time and place, there were very few other options. The lady who owned the land and the cabin where the Partons lived was a lady named Martha, called Aunt Martha by the Partons, even though she wasn't related to them. She took a liking to little Dolly and often gave her gingerbread, which was a great treat to a kid as poor as they were. Aunt Martha suffered from severe asthma, and Dolly would often stick by her side during her spells, providing comfort to Aunt Martha. Then, sadly, Aunt Martha passed when Dolly was still very young. She recalled in her book of going to Aunt Martha's house after they had moved off Martha's land when Dolly was about 5 years old. She was excited to see her Aunt Martha, as she had not seen her since they moved over to their new-to-them home over in the Canton's Chapel area. When they arrived at Aunt Martha's house, she busted through the door calling for her. She noticed there were several people there that she didn't know, but that didn't stop her. She wasn't there to see them anyway. She was there to see her precious Aunt Martha. Well, when she rounded the corner and got to the living room, she saw Aunt Martha's body laid out. She had passed. They had come to pay their respects, and Dolly was devastated. They had not told her beforehand. In an effort to get a reaction out of little Dolly, her older brothers forced her close to the coffin and made her touch the body. She said after that experience, she hadn't been able to go to a funeral or look at a body since. It truly traumatized her. The Partons' little cabin was crowded, loud, and full of love. 12 kids in 2 rooms will do that. But Dolly stood out early, not because she was flashy, but because she was watching, listening, absorbing. She wrote her first song at 5 years old. That's right, folks, 5 years old. That first song she wrote was about her little corncob doll that her mother had put together for her, and her father had made eyes from burning 2 dots into the corncob with a hot fire poker. While other kids were playing tag, Dolly was already trying to rhyme pain with hope. She was writing songs and pretending to be a star, something she wanted so badly. She would stand on the front porch of their little cabin, using it as her makeshift stage while singing into a can attached to the end of a stick. The animals in the front yard were her audience, and she would sing to them for hours as if they were a group of her biggest fans filling up the Ryman Auditorium at the Grand Ole Opry. And speaking of those animals, there's a funny little story involving a few of them that Dolly told during her 60-minute special. She recalled the old family story of when one day little Dolly, just old enough to toddle around, couldn't be found in the house, so her family went looking for her outside. There was an old sow nursing her piglets just down a ways from the cabin in the yard. As they called for Dolly and went looking for her, they found her nuzzled up to the sow amongst the piglets. She was nursing with the piglets. You know that old southern saying, when someone has a dirty face, you look like you've been sucking a sow. Well, Dolly didn't just look like she'd been sucking a sow, she had been sucking a mud-caked sow. And, of course, her family has never let Dolly live that story down, and it's brought up at family gatherings as a loving little jab at her. Let's talk about a moment in her childhood that at the time caused her much joy and pain, and would later become the subject of her favorite song that she's written. In that song, that would later define her childhood and later become the basis for a movie, was Coat of Many Colors, and it wasn't fiction, it was memory. One day, as the fall was fast approaching and there was a hint of a nip in the wind, her mama set out to stitch little Dolly a coat out of scraps of cloth which had been given to the family by neighbors. And while Dolly watched her mama intently, her mama told her the Bible story of Joseph while she sewed. Dolly wore that coat to school, proud as could be. But the kids laughed. But Dolly never forgot how it felt. Years later, she'd say, "I never thought it was ugly. I thought it was beautiful, because it was made with love." She loved the coat so much and was so proud of the coat that she refused to take it off when she got to school that day, even as the kids laughed at her. She was heartbroken at their laughter and couldn't understand why they were laughing. Even the teacher prodded Dolly to put it in the coat closet, but Dolly refused. She sat there wearing the coat the whole day, wearing it with pride, even though it had actually been a little too warm to even wear the coat to school at all. However, her mama allowed her to wear it because Dolly loved it so much. That song would eventually make grown men cry and earn her a place in the Smithsonian Institution, but back then, it was just a little girl learning something powerful. By the time Dolly was 10 years old, folks around East Tennessee already knew her by name. She was singing on local radio stations, then local television. A little blonde girl with a voice that didn't match her size, and a confidence that made adults blink twice. She had landed a job singing on the radio and TV, promoting Cas Walker's grocery stores. And from all accounts, Cas Walker was quite the character in Sevier County. He owned a chain of grocery stores and would promote them with radio and TV spots with a variety of entertainers. One day, as a youngster, Dolly went up to Cas and said, "I want to work for you, Mr. Walker." He said, "You've got a deal." Dolly couldn't believe it. He followed that with, "Most people come to me saying they want a job, but you came to me and said you want to work for me. You're the first person to ever tell me they wanted to work, and not just wanted a job." So Dolly set out singing and promoting Mr. Walker's stores. Dolly recorded her first record in 1959 at the age of 13. She had made the trip all the way to Louisiana to make the recording on the Gold Band Records label, of which she had been able to land studio time through her family connections. She made the trip down there by bus, with her grandmother accompanying her. The name of the song she recorded was Puppy Love. As good as the song was, and as much as the people around her loved it, it did not make the charts. Also, at the age of 13, she made her first appearance at the Grand Ole Opry. Now listen, most folks walk into the Opry like they're walking into church for the first time. Dolly walked in there like she was walking into her future. She sang, "You Gotta Be Born Again," and that night, Johnny Cash himself came out and hugged her on stage. She later said, "That hug from Johnny Cash was better than any award I ever got." At that point, she already knew something important. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't a phase. This was her life. Dolly graduated high school in 1964, and get this, the very next day she packed her bags and moved to Nashville, Tennessee. No backup plan, no safety net, just songs. She told in an interview later in life that during a speech she had made during graduation, she had been laughed at by the crowd. She had made the statement that she was going to Nashville to become a star, and with that, the laughter erupted. She didn't understand at the time why the crowd had laughed at her because she was absolutely serious. I guess she showed them. She later joked, "I always knew Nashville was where I belonged. I just didn't know how long it'd take Nashville to figure that out." When Dolly arrived in Nashville, the reality of life hit her. But she was determined that she was going to make it no matter what. She had taken a babysitting job along with a few other odds and ends to be able to keep a roof over her head, but that's about all it provided for her. There were times when Dolly would be starving, not having any money for food, and from time to time she would find herself putting ketchup in hot water to form a makeshift soup to try to fill her belly and calm the hunger pains. But it was that grit and determination that kept her going and provided raw emotion for her songwriting. Her first big break came as a songwriter, not as a singer. She signed with Combine Publishing, and before long, artists were recording her songs. One of the biggest was Put It Off Till Tomorrow, recorded by Bill Phillips, with Dolly singing harmony. That song cracked the charts, and suddenly, people started paying attention. But Dolly didn't want to stand behind anybody forever. She wanted center stage. September of 1967 rolled around, and folks, it was marked by two big milestones. Dolly released her first full-length studio album entitled Hello, I'm Dolly. And then, even bigger break for Dolly came when she joined the Porter Wagoner Show. Now, if you don't know Porter Wagoner, picture a man with hair so tall it deserved its own zip code, dressed louder than a parade float, and famous enough to open doors in Nashville. Porter saw something in Dolly, and Dolly saw opportunity. She was offered $60,000 a year to do the show. To her, at the time, that was an unheard of amount. More than her daddy would make in his entire life, she thought. And if y'all are wondering what that works out to be in today's money, well, that equals out to be about $580,000 a year. When she was offered that by Porter himself, she paused, and he said, "Well, will you accept that?" Having watched her daddy make many a shrewd business deals, she replied with what she figured her daddy would say, "I'll have to think about it." And after a moment's pause, she thought better of it and quickly said, "Yes." So, what's the first thing a country girl with big dreams from the Smokies does when she started making good money and after becoming established with her life's essentials? Well, she went out and bought herself a Cadillac, of course. When she really started raking in the money, she purchased her mama a brand new Cadillac and her daddy a new pickup truck. And while we're on the subject of cars and her Nashville arrival, she may have had to spend a little money on her husband's truck. You see, early in her career, she arrived at the Grand Ole Opry, and while trying to park Carl's truck, she overshot the parking space and drove right into the brick wall of the Ryman. It's said that some tour guides on certain tours still point out the replacement bricks that can still be seen today from that little incident. Porter and Dolly became one of the most popular duos in country music. Their harmonies were tight, their banter was charming, their chemistry, unmistakable. But behind the scenes, it wasn't all rhinestones and smiles. Porter wanted Dolly to stay his star. Dolly wanted to be her own. She later said, very gently, "Porter and I loved each other, but we were pulling in two different directions. That tension would eventually give birth to one of the greatest songs ever written. But we ain't there yet. Let's talk a little bit about Dolly's marriage and how she got noticed by Porter." In 1966, Dolly quietly married Carl Dean, a very quiet man whose family was in the paving business. They met each other while Dolly was at the wishy-washy washateria doing her laundry. While her laundry was washing, she stood on the sidewalk enjoying a soda and taking in the sunshine. Carl pulled up and said something to the effect of, "You're going to get sunburn out here." She was quite taken by him and would later come to realize that he was the one she was going to marry. The record company that had signed Dolly didn't want her to get married just yet. They felt it would stifle her stardom, and they didn't want to take that chance after putting so much money in backing her. She didn't let that stop her, though. She and Carl snuck off to Ringold, Georgia, along with her mama, and were married. A funny little side story about that wedding. Dolly's mama left her purse at the church after the little private ceremony. Unfortunately, Dolly's mama didn't know her purse was missing until the group had traveled for quite some time in the direction of home. They had to turn around and backtrack to retrieve Mrs. Parton's purse, adding hours to the trip. They kept the marriage a secret and went to Georgia to get married in order to keep the marriage out of the Tennessee newspapers so her record label wouldn't find out about her defiance. A year later, after her career had gained traction, the record company told her she could finally get married. But the joke was on them. Dolly was already hitched. Most people didn't even know he existed, and that's exactly how he wanted it. Carl wasn't interested in fame. He wasn't interested in show business. He just loved Dolly. She once said, "He's kind of shy and quiet. What we have together is so sweet and good that I'd never want it to get jumbled up with all the other things in my life." They kept their marriage private, strong, and remarkably steady in an industry that chews up relationships like bubblegum. Carl didn't like show business. He was a country boy who greatly valued his privacy. Dolly asked him to go with her to one of her first industry show awards events. She said he got all gussied up, rented a tux for the occasion, went the whole 9 yards to fix up for the awards event. She could tell all through the evening that he was miserable, and when they got back home that evening after the event, he took off all that finery and asked her to please never ask him to go to another event such as that again, a request that she honored. When asked later in life if that bothered her, she would say absolutely not. She knew he loved her and supported her. She joked, saying that he not only didn't want to go to award events or industry parties, but he wouldn't go to her singing gigs either. She would laugh and say he would always be afraid she would have a disaster performance and be laughed off the stage, and his heart just couldn't take that. Carl would inspire Jolene, one of the most misunderstood songs ever written, not because he strayed, but because Dolly was human enough to feel jealousy and honest enough to admit it. She explained, "Jolene was based on a real woman who flirted with my husband, and I didn't like that one bit." Now, if that ain't marriage, I don't know what is. And just to give you a little background on the song was about a woman who flirted with Carl down at the bank, but her name really wasn't Jolene. Dolly got the name Jolene from a little girl who was getting her autograph, and when Dolly asked her what her name was, she said Jolene, and she thought that was the prettiest name she had ever heard, and she knew that someday she would put it in a song, and that's how the song Jolene came about. Now, let's talk about how Porter got wind of Dolly. In 1965, Dolly signed with Monument Records, the record company that hadn't wanted Dolly to get married right away. Fred Foster of Monument Records saw Dolly's raw talent immediately. At first, Monument and Fred Foster was pushing for Dolly to record so-called bubblegum pop. Dolly knew this was not the direction she wanted to go. She pushed back, and the record company gave in after her songwriting successes came to light. They hesitantly allowed Dolly to record her own material. Through Monument Records, Dolly saw her first charting hit, Dumb Blonde, released in 1966. Then, in early 67, her song Something Fishy from her first album, Hello, I'm Dolly, hit number 17 on the charts. It was with these charting hits that Porter got wind of Dolly, and she found herself as his partner on the show. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Dolly was writing hit after hit, but the transition onto Porter's show was a little rocky at first. See, Porter had a regular girl partner on his show. Her name was Norma Jean Beasley, known on the show as Norma Jean. Norma Jean was very popular on the show. To say the least, she was very well loved. Norma Jean joined the Porter Wagoner Show in 1961, and in 1967, she left the show to get married and start a family. As mentioned before, in September 67, after enjoying some success through her time with Monument Records and Fred Foster, she was picked to replace Norma Jean on the Porter Wagoner Show. Unfortunately, though, since Norma Jean was so beloved, Dolly was heckled a bit at first when she was introduced to the audiences and they were told she was to be Norma Jean's replacement. This happened for a few shows in the beginning, and there were even a few times where the audiences would start to chant Norma Jean's name as the show started warming up to start. Audiences soon warmed up to Dolly, though, and she became very popular and a very important part of the show. Now, y'all, joining Porter's show gave Dolly unmatched exposure to country music audiences. The show featured Porter, Dolly, the band, and special guests performing live, and included comedy bits by comedian Spec Rhodes. Of course, the highlight of the shows became the duets Porter and Dolly would perform together and were so famous for. The Porter Wagoner Show wasn't just a TV show, it was also a regular touring road show as well. Being on the TV show and countless stages around the country on the road with a touring show helped Dolly build her stage presence as well as help grow her fan base nationwide. In her book, she said that being on Porter's show taught her how to perform. She said she already knew how to sing, but he taught her how to perform. After joining the Porter Wagoner Show, Porter helped Dolly get a contract with the powerhouse record label RCA-Victor. After winning a much-coveted contract with RCA-Victor, Dolly recorded many hit songs and enjoyed bigger and better promotion from the label than she had had with Monument. The contract with RCA-Victor also kicked off a very successful duet partnership between Porter and Dolly. Porter and Dolly's first duet single was a remake of Tom Paxton's The Last Thing on My Mind. The duet single was released in 1967 and quickly climbed up to the top 10 on Billboard's country chart by 1968. Now, Porter and Dolly were famous for their harmonizing. Porter said it was like blood harmony. They harmonized as if they were blood related, with their voices blending so well. Their chemistry was undeniable as well, and in 1968, the industry recognized that harmony and chemistry by awarding the duo the Country Music Association Vocal Group of the Year award. Porter and Dolly released 13 studio albums together and had 21 singles on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart between the late 1960s and early 1980s. That's right, folks, 13 albums and 21 chart-topping singles, and the popularity of these lasted into the 80s, long after Dolly parted ways with Porter and his show. Maybe you've heard of a few of them. They include The Last Thing on My Mind, The Right Combination, Burning the Midnight Oil, Lost Forever in Your Kiss, If Teardrops Were Pennies, Please Don't Stop Loving Me, and Making Plans. Please Don't Stop Loving Me was their number one single, spending a week atop the charts in 1974. Dolly didn't just enjoy duet success while on Porter's show. She was riding up a storm, producing one hit after another, including Just Because I'm a Woman, Mule Skinner Blues, and Joshua, which, by the way, became her first solo number one country hit. She also wrote and recorded Coat of Many Colors and My Tennessee Mountain Home during this time, which helped define her solo artistry while tied to Porter and his show. But she was still often introduced as Porter Wagoner's girl singer. That didn't set right with her. She wanted control, creative freedom, ownership. And in 1973, she did the unthinkable. She left the Porter Wagoner Show. Porter was hurt, real hurt. And Dolly, sitting alone one night, tried to explain herself the only way she knew how. She wrote a song, a quiet song, a gentle song, a song that wasn't angry, just honest. I Will Always Love You. But that song, and what it would become, is where our next chapter truly begins. And that's where we'll pause for tonight, y'all, because next time we're going to talk about I Will Always Love You, Dolly breaking free as a solo superstar, her crossover gamble, and how a mountain girl became a global name. So don't go far. Rock that chair a little slower. We'll pick it up right here next time with part 2 of this 3-part podcast about the life and career of Dolly Parton. You don't want to miss the next 2 episodes. They'll be packed with even more facts, interesting stories, and of course, Dolly's humor and quotes. And please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear what your favorite Dolly songs are and your memories of Dolly. Also, let me know if I've left something out. Until next time, good night and be blessed. Thanks for listening.